made the pen fall, whereas the Asherites would say, by saying so, you have denied God's omnipotence. It was God who made the pen fall. There is no semi-independent natural law of gravity that makes the pen fall when I release it. It could just as well have risen to the ceiling or gone sideways. And next time it may. Inshallah. Thank you, Ray. Yes, ma'am.
But it never does.
It never does. Okay, how do they get around the fact that the pen always falls or the rock hits the ground? Or in al-Ghazali's famous example, he said, fire does not burn cotton. God does. It's just a coincidence that the cotton ignites when you touch fire to it, but there's no causal relationship between the two. They get around this by saying, God has certain habits. And it's his habit, it apparently is his habit, to make the pen fall. But gravity hasn't done it. And if you say it is, you have committed blasphemy, the sin of shirk. Now, the constitution of reality, of creation, is in the form of atoms. They revert to a pre-Socratic form of Greek atomism, and they say that everything is constituted by time and space atoms. And these infinitesimally small time and space atoms have no nature. In other words, they're not disposed to be one thing or another. There's not a plant atom or an animal atom. They're all neutral, faceless atoms. And whatever anything is at any given point in its existence is the direct result of God willing that agglomeration of atoms to be you. And you only exist in the instant in which he has willed those atoms to cohere into that particular thing, like your chair. Now, were you to say, will this attractive lady remain what she is while I'm finishing my sentence, what would you think? You think she will or not? Okay, why will she remain the same? Because you're coming right along. The incipient Asherites, and this is very impressive. Ray, you've been leading these, having a bad influence in this parish. That's exactly right. If God wills. It's exactly that there is nothing in human nature that would keep any of us what we are in one instant to the next, because these time-space atoms exist only for an instant, they're annihilated, and then God reconstitutes creation all over again, all the time. And there is no connection between one space-time atom and another, but for the will of God directly making that something similar to what it's been before. What have I just done here? You think? You think there's motion there. That's not what has just happened. What has happened is that my hand has been constituted, annihilated, reconstituted in another space, barely removed from the other, annihilated and reconstituted a series of times until it gives the appearance of motion. I think people here, there's enough gray hair, everyone remembers 35 millimeter film? The way we used to watch movies? Well, when the sprockets caught on the wheel and the film moved, it gave the impression of motion. But actually, every single frame was distinct, and the next frame was only infinitesimally different until you had a series of them, which when moved quickly gave the impression that something was moving. That's an analogy to the Asherite metaphysics. Every one of those frames is created independently and distinctly. So here you have Allah up here, and you have a series of things that look like they're continuous in time taking place here. When, according to them, God is directly willing each of these distinct events. And the only thing that keeps them together is God. They have no relationship to each other along this line, none whatsoever. That is because things have no nature. There is no in of themselves. For instance, another quick example. An acorn grows into an oak tree, right? Now, nowhere along the trajectory of its growth from an acorn into an oak tree will it turn into a giraffe, right? Why not? Because it has the nature of an oak tree. This is exactly what the Asherites deny. There is no nature, and there's no accounting for what that oak tree or what that acorn may turn into, and it may not necessarily turn into an oak, but for God's habits. Now, Maimonides, the great, great Jewish thinker who had to flee Moorish Spain, ended up in Cairo, and he was trying to give an example of how these people think. And he said, well, every day through Cairo, the caliph takes a ride. And every day he goes the same way. He goes straight for 3 blocks, he takes a left for a block, then he goes forward for another. He did it yesterday, he did it last week, he did it this morning. But tomorrow, he might go a different way. Why? Well, because he's the caliph. He can go wherever he wants. Thus, today, the sun rose in the east. It set in the west. It did it yesterday. It's done it for several thousand years. But tomorrow, it may rise in the west and set in the north. Why? Because Allah can do anything He wants. And indeed, in Muslim apocryphal literature, the sun does rise in the west and set in the east. So there are no natural laws. If you're wondering why science was stillborn in the Muslim world, I think you may have a little insight here because of Asherite metaphysics. You don't go searching for the natural laws in the created world if your theology tells you that such laws do not exist, and that to suppose such laws exist is an act of presumptuous blasphemy. I need to inflict upon you just a couple of little readings, because I sometimes wonder if people actually think I'm making this stuff up. And that's why in the book I provide the translations of these philosophical and theological texts from the 9th through the 12th century and later, so that you can see for yourself this isn't just a one-off. It's not just one theologian in the 9th century. It's repeated century after century after century till these concepts form the culture of the Islamic world, which accounts for its dysfunctional nature. Here we have Muhammad Yusuf as-Sanusi in the 15th century. Again, he's just repeating things. And he's talking about this idea that you cannot know good or evil unless God tells you. It is impossible for the Most High, Allah, to determine an act as obligatory or forbidden for the sake of any objective, since all acts are equal in that they are His creation and production. Therefore, the specification of certain acts as obligatory and others as forbidden or with any determination takes place by His pure choice, which has no cause. His choice has no cause. This is a very key thing. God is above or without reason. He's pure will and power. God acts for no reasons. Therefore, what He does cannot be understood. What is one of the things He does? He creates the universe, which itself then becomes unintelligible. There was a great saying by Albert Einstein. He said, the only incomprehensible thing about the world is that it's comprehensible. Isn't it startling that our minds cohere with this reality exterior to us, and the concepts and ideas we have of it are congruent with the way things are? And because of our understanding, we have medicine and refrigerators and machines that it all works. Einstein caught the remarkable by saying that's the only incomprehensible thing, is that the universe is comprehensible. Now, an Asherite parallel statement would go something like this.